Story time about how my boyfriend caught me cheating on him with his best friend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. My boyfriend is a total asshole. He's super controlling and jealous. If we ever go to parties, he never lets me out of his sight. And if I ever get hit on, he always blames it on me and tells me that I'm an attention seeker. He even tells me that I'm lucky he hasn't broken up with me because I have cellulite. He's always showing me pictures of other girls on Instagram and tells me that I need to work out so that I can look like them. We've been together for almost exactly a year, but recently I decided that I wanted to break up with him. The only part is I don't know how to do it because he has such a short temper. Well, his best friend, let's call him John. John is super nice and kind. He's super easygoing and makes fun of my boyfriend whenever he gets jealous. I recently opened up to John and asked him how I should do it. He basically told me to just get it over with. Well, 2 weeks ago, we all went to a birthday party. I got extremely drunk. As always, my boyfriend was being an asshole. I don't know what came over me, but I grabbed John's hand and I took him to the bathroom. I locked us in there and we started making out. And my boyfriend literally breaks down the door. My boyfriend breaks down the door and finds me and his best friend in the bathroom shirtless. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. My boyfriend grabs John by the collar and throws him on the floor. Then they start punching each other. I put my shirt back on and several other people started trying to break up the fight. When they finally separated, I told my boyfriend that I didn't want to be with him and that I was breaking up with him. And he grabbed my arm really hard, pulled me out of the party, and put me in his car. He started punching his steering wheel and I told him to calm down. That's when he tells me that I can't break up with him and that I'll never find anyone better. He drove me to my house and on the way he was interrogating me. I told him he was too jealous, controlling, and that he made me feel terrible about myself. Then he told me that that's how he shows his love. Then I told him it was over again. He said the only reason I was breaking up with him was because I was drunk. When he finally left my house, I called John to apologize for everything. That's when John told me my boyfriend had been cheating on me for months, and that he actually got a girl pregnant. And worst of all, I knew the girl. Part 3 is up. I knew the girl that my boyfriend had gotten pregnant. I also knew where she lived, so I got in my car and I went over there. She opened the door and I could clearly see a baby bump. I could not believe it. She invited me in and explained that her and my boyfriend had been seeing each other for a few months, and that he wanted her to have an abortion but she didn't want to. She also told me that he threatened her. She also told me that meeting him was the worst thing that ever happened to her. That's when I start getting phone calls from my boyfriend. He starts sending me messages asking me where I am, but I had turned off my location so he couldn't see. I finally answered the phone, and when I told him where I was, he hung up on me. When I got home, he was there waiting for me. He denied everything. He said that John made all of that up and that the girl was helping him, and that they were only setting out to break us up. He's basically forcing me to stay with him. So now we're all waiting for the baby to be born to get a paternity test. Also, John and I have been hooking up on the regular. I know that's not good. What do you guys think I should do? Story time about how I escaped my abusive husband. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. My soon-to-be ex-husband is the most toxic person I've ever met in my entire life. We've been married for almost 3 years. We got married after 4 months of being boyfriend and girlfriend. And to be honest, no, we really didn't know each other. At the beginning, he was totally kind, generous, and really fun. We were always going to parties and we had so many friends. Here's where things started getting scary. He never posted me on his Instagram. In fact, he rarely ever posted on his Instagram at all. I'm very active on social media. I'm constantly posting pictures of us together. The fact that he never posted me on his social media made me think that maybe he was trying to look for other girls. But then I found out the truth. One day I get a DM from this girl, and she told me how my boyfriend had abused her in the past. She even had to get a restraining order. She basically told me she wanted to warn me about him. I didn't respond to her message because I wanted to ask him first. I showed him the messages later on that day, and he went nuts. He punched the wall, and he slapped me straight across the face. Part 2 is up. He slapped me straight across the face and I fell to the ground. This is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. When he saw what he'd done, he started apologizing right away. Then he said that the girl who contacted me on Instagram to warn me about him was just his stalker, and that he had broken up with this girl but she couldn't get over him. At the time, we weren't living together, so I went back to my mom's place. I didn't speak to him for a few days. Then he started coming over to my mom's house every single day with flowers, apologizing and begging me back. Unfortunately, I decided to forgive him. 2 weeks later, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. I posted a picture of my engagement ring on Instagram, and that's when I got another message from another girl. She told me that my boyfriend was abusive and that she also had to get a restraining order. I didn't know who to believe. I went to my mother-in-law's house and I asked her what had happened. And she basically told me that he has issues with his temper. I asked her if what the girl said was true, and she said it wasn't her business to say. A few weeks later, we got married, and that's when the real torture started. He became super controlling and mean, and when I wouldn't do something he wanted, would lock me in my room for hours. Part 3. My husband would lock me in the bedroom for hours. But then it got worse. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. It got to the point that whenever he would get mad, he would either push me, shake me, or slap me. This went on for a year, but I always hoped that he would just change. After 2 years, I decided to get in contact with the women who said they got restraining orders against my husband. Met up with both of them at a cafe to lie to my husband and say that I was going to be late at work. They brought all their receipts. They had pictures and text messages, emails, and police reports. Couldn't believe it. I mean, I could, but at the same time I couldn't, you know? If I had just paid attention to these girls before we got married, none of this would have happened. But these girls knew exactly what I was going through. So we hatched a plan of how I would escape my abusive husband. At this point, he controlled everything, my cell phone and my bank account. By the way, I hadn't told my mom anything at this point. When I asked her for money and I told her why, she was shocked. The plan would be that I was going to escape at night. I waited for Friday because I knew he'd go out with his friends to drink. I called an Uber, but a few minutes later, my husband shows up at our door. Part 4 is up. The night I was planning to escape my abusive husband, I called an Uber to the house, but my husband showed up 2 minutes later. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. As soon as he walks in through the door, he was totally drunk. That's when he told me that he was hungry. I pretended that everything was normal and that I didn't have an Uber coming to save me. I went to the kitchen, I made him a sandwich as quickly as I could. I came back out, took one bite, and started falling asleep. Thank God. I hid in my backpack behind a curtain, slowly grabbed the backpack and my shoes, and that's when my cell phone notified me that the Uber was there. I was terrorized at this point because I was hoping the noise from the cell phone didn't wake him up. I turned around, but he was totally passed out. I ran barefoot to the Uber, got in, and told him to drive away. Went straight to a friend's house and turned off my phone. Next day, I went straight to a lawyer to file for divorce. I had text messages and pictures. I also went to the police and they said that I can't file a restraining order yet. My husband, of course, is already looking for me. He went to my mom's house, but she didn't let him in. But here's the problem. I already miss him. He sent me an email apologizing, swearing that it won't happen again. My gut's telling me not to go back. What do you guys think? Story time about how I came out as gay to my husband. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I'm 27 years old, and when I was in high school, I knew that I like girls. In fact, I pretty much only dated girls throughout all of my high school. I did also date guys. My parents were totally accepting of this, by the way. Growing up, I always knew that I wanted to marry a man so that I could have kids. When I got into college, I started dating this girl. Her and I dated for a couple of weeks, and she introduced me to my now husband. So he and I started hooking up behind her back, and she eventually found out, and she broke up with me. Fast forward a few years later, and we're married. But here's the problem. I found myself only being attracted to women, and I was definitely not attracted to my husband. Obviously, this became a huge problem in the relationship. So guess what my husband did? He hired an escort to come spend some time with us, if you know what I mean. This was great, but I basically only wanted to be with the escort, not my husband. A few weeks later, the escort and I actually started dating. So bad, I know. My husband had no idea. And this escort actually asked me to be her girlfriend. Part 2 is up. So the escort and I started dating behind my husband's back. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Like, her and I were in a full-blown relationship. Mind you, I'm a woman. Mind you, my husband doesn't know that I like women only. This went on for a few months. I was living a total lie. My husband would go to work. Since I work from home, I would go to my escort girlfriend's apartment and spend the day with her. I even took a toothbrush and some clothes. One day, my girlfriend and I decided to go watch a movie. We're standing in line to buy popcorn, and of course, we're kissing and holding hands. This is when one of my husband's employees comes up to me, taps my shoulder, and says hi. But she acted like she didn't see anything. Like she was just coming up to me and saying hi. I could tell that something was off. I mean, she saw me kissing this girl. That's when the guilt started getting to me. I could no longer lie to my husband. I knew I had to come out to him. That same night, I talked to my husband. I confessed everything and told him that I really liked women only. That's when he tells me that he knew about the relationship this whole time. That he knew I only liked women. Part 3 is up. My husband tells me that he knew I was having an affair this whole time. That he also knew that I only liked women. Claiming this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. That's when my husband tells me that it's okay. Because he can deal with me having this affair. Because he didn't want anyone to know that he was married to someone that liked women. He told me he'd rather stay married, have kids with me, and basically live a lie. I also forgot to mention my husband's a really wealthy guy. He offered me a lot of money to stay with him and have kids. Last week, I got a letter from his lawyer. It was a contract basically saying that if I stay with him and have his kids, he'll pay me a very large amount of money. But here's the thing. I've fallen in love with my escort girlfriend. She thinks I'm going to divorce my husband to be with her. But my husband thinks that I'm going to sign this contract and have his kids. Even my mother-in-law is getting involved. She's begging me to sign the contract and have the kids. Never thought I'd have to choose between love and money. A few days ago, my escort girlfriend actually asked me to move in with her. I told my husband, he said no. What should I do? Story time about how I tricked my ex into paying for all of my plastic surgery. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. A little backstory. I met my ex at the gym. He was actually my personal trainer. He was in really good shape while I was definitely out of shape and pudgy. He motivated me to work out and lose weight. I quickly realized I had a major crush on him. So after a full year of training, I had lost about 30 pounds. I felt really good about myself. So I mustered up the courage to tell him that I had a crush on him. But unfortunately, he told me that he never dated clients. Then he said that we still had a lot of work to do on my body anyway. It was a punch to the gut. I decided I needed to get a new trainer because of what he said and because obviously I had a crush on him. Well, it just so happens that I landed in my dream job. I started making a lot of money. He followed me on Instagram and he started noticing it. I moved into a better apartment and I got a new car. I also got lip filler and cheek filler. That's when he calls me up and asked me on a date. I said yes right away. You'll never guess what happened next. Part 2 is up. Once he saw I had money, he asked me out on a date. I had been crushing on him for more than a year, so I said yes. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. We set up a date and it went really well. He paid for dinner and congratulated me on all my success. After that, we started hanging out almost every single weekend, and about a month later, he asked me to be his girlfriend, and I was so happy. I had my dream job, I lost weight, I looked damn good. And I got the perfect boyfriend too. But this is when he got toxic. He would start to criticize little things about my body. For example, I had a little bit of fat on my stomach, and he would point that out. Or he would point out that my boobs weren't that big. And like I said in part 1, he was a trainer, so he had abs. Made me feel self-conscious, so I never got undressed in front of him. Then one day he suggested I go to a plastic surgeon. He even looked up a few in my area. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend actually suggested I go to a plastic surgeon because he didn't like that my boobs were small and that I had a bit of a tummy. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I got extremely offended, of course. Then he acted like what he said was completely normal. I told him that I love my body as it was. Then he said that I still needed to do a lot of work on it. Then he insinuated that his girlfriend needs to look just as good as he does. In other words, he thought he was better looking than me. So I thought to myself, okay, sure, let's go to this plastic surgeon. But I was gonna find a way to make him pay for it. You see, at this point I was paying for a lot. I would pay for our dates and dinners. He would even sometimes ask me for gas money. We went to the plastic surgeon and I decided to get my boobies done. So I told my boyfriend that all my money was tied up in investments. Then I needed him to loan me the money. He said, yeah, sure, and he transferred the money. I got the plastic surgery and it looks amazing. I've since moved to another city, blocked him on my phone and on social media, and he hasn't been able to find me. I mean, I think he kind of deserved it, but I also feel guilty. What should I do? Story time about how I faked a pregnancy to get my boyfriend to marry me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Okay, this is super embarrassing and I did get in trouble for this, so strap in. He's now my ex because of course he dumped my ass. He and I met in college and we were totally in love. Like, we spent every single day together and we moved in together really fast. We even stopped going to parties just to be together. About 3 years into the relationship, I told him that I definitely wanted to get married. He told me that he just wasn't ready. Then everything got really bad. He became really cold towards me. When I confronted him about it, he was honest and he told me that he just didn't love me anymore. Then he moved out and literally cut me out of his life. Even his parents told me to leave him alone. So there's a pregnant girl working at the coffee shop I usually go to. I paid her $600 to pee on a pregnancy stick. I knew this was the only way I was going to get him to marry me. I show up to my boyfriend's house, but guess who's there? He's with his ex-girlfriend sitting on the couch watching a movie. That's when I willed myself to cry and I show him the pregnancy test. Part 2 is up. So I show my ex the fake pregnancy test so that he can marry me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Mind you, his ex is sitting on the couch waiting for him to come back so that they can finish watching their stupid movie. And when he saw that the test was positive, he started to cry. I told him that we had to talk, and he told his ex to leave. Then he tells his parents to come into the room, and his mom also started to cry when she saw the pregnancy test. I couldn't really tell if they were happy tears or if they were like, oh no tears. That's when I told him that I fully expected him to ask me to marry him. I even told him that I was 2 months along so we could start planning the wedding. That's when he told his parents that I was right. Then he asked me to marry him. I knew that I got what I wanted, but I had no idea how I was going to fake this pregnancy. A few days later, he moved back into our apartment. He started painting the guest room so that it could be the nursery. But here's the worst part. A month later, I was still not able to get pregnant. I didn't know what to do, so I started eating a lot of food to fake the pregnancy bump. I would eat McDonald's for breakfast and Taco Bell for dinner. Part 3 is up. In order to fake the pregnancy, I had to gain weight. So I started eating tons of food. I would have pizza every other day. I ate 2 pints of ice cream a day. And every time I passed by a fast food place, I would pick up something to eat. I was gaining a little bit of weight, so people believed me when I said I was pregnant. Finally, the wedding came around. I was so relieved once we were married because I knew I had to eventually go to the doctor. And I had decided that once the doctor said that I wasn't pregnant, I would put on a show and pretend that I just lost the baby. Well, when it finally happened, my husband straight up asked me if I made it all up. And I told him yes. It literally took him 1 hour to move out of the apartment. He went straight to get a restraining order, and my parents sent me to a psychiatrist. But you see, we're still married. He hasn't filed for divorce, so I think I should reach out to him. I know he and I will end up together. What do you guys think? Story time about how I caught my husband with his best friend in bed. Who, by the way, is a guy. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I knew that my husband was bi before we got married and it never bothered me. In fact, that's how we met. A few years ago, I was dating this guy, and we had an open relationship, and he would tell me about this other guy that he was hooking up with. Well, he introduced me to his male friend, and we actually ended up hooking up. A few months later, we became boyfriend and girlfriend, and a few years later, we got married. So I always knew my husband was bi. Here's when his best friend comes into the picture. Let's call him Kenny. Kenny's been best friends with my husband for over 7 years. They've known each other longer than I've known my husband. But get this, Kenny is also married. Kenny would sometimes sleep over our house when it was really late. A few weeks ago, he slept over. I went to bed, but at 4 in the morning, I wake up and my husband is not in bed. So I go looking for him and I hear a noise coming from the guest bedroom. I walk in and see that my husband is tied to the bed. Guess what they were doing? Part 2 is up. See, my husband is tied to the bed and his best friend Kenny is doing things to him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I was so shocked I ran to the toilet and vomited. Kenny went straight to put on his clothes, but my husband was still tied to the damn bed. Before Kenny could start untying him, I straight up started punching my husband in the face, the chest, the neck. I felt uncontrollable rage for the first time. This whole time that I thought they were just best friends, my husband and his male best friend Kenny are hooking up behind my back. Here's when I really started to lose control. Kenny tried to pull me off of my husband, so I noticed that they had a bunch of candles lit. So I grabbed 2 candles and threw them straight at Kenny's head. One of them missed, but the other one got him. So Kenny grabbed his phone and started calling 911. Mind you, my husband is still tied to the bed at this point. Then I grabbed another candle and poured all the hot wax on top of my husband's you-know-what. Part 3 is up. My husband is tied to the bed, so I grabbed the candle and poured all the hot wax on his you-know-what. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Kenny has already called the police at this point and they are on their way. I'm still in blind rage and my husband is still tied to the bed. That's when Kenny grabs me by the hair, takes me to the bathroom and throws me into the tub. I landed on my arm and actually broke it. He goes to untie my husband and that's when the police knock on the door. Well, guess what? They arrested me for assaulting my husband. I sat in a jail cell for 6 hours before my husband came to bail me out. Of course, he apologized and said he would drop the charges. Apparently, Kenny asked his wife for a divorce and is demanding that my husband and I get divorced because he wants to be with my husband. My husband basically said that he doesn't know who to choose, me or him. I really do love my husband. What do I do? Story time about how I hooked up with my boyfriend's dad. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My boyfriend's dad is an absolute dilf. He used to be a competitive bodybuilder and even did some modeling back in the day. Well, let's just say my boyfriend didn't turn out with the same looks. Don't get me wrong, my boyfriend is really sweet, but he's not the best looking guy. One of the reasons we started dating and I really liked him was because of how considerate and loving he was. We started off as friends and he would take me out to dinner, wine and dine me, eventually asked me to be his girlfriend and I said yes. We both come from wealthy families, and our families loved the idea of us being together. Exactly a year ago, we moved in together, and he got a new job that required him to travel a lot. Well, he asked his dad to come check on me. So his dad would come over, we would watch movies, and just hang out. But one night we decided to do some drinking. I got super tipsy, and so did he. One thing led to another, and we ended up, And after that, we did it over and over. Of course, my boyfriend's dad felt super guilty, and so did I. I mean, he was cheating on his wife with me, and I was cheating on his son with him. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I hooked up with my boyfriend's dad. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. After my boyfriend's dad and I had hooked up a couple of times, of course, he felt really guilty, and so did I. We decided to end things cordially and never tell anyone about it. Fast forward to when my boyfriend comes home from his work trip. I had to pretend like nothing happened, but it was really hard because at this point I definitely caught feelings for my boyfriend's dad. I became really distant from my boyfriend and he started noticing. He also asked me one day if his dad came over to check up on me, which I said yes. After that, things were just not the same between my boyfriend and I. He would always ask me why I never touched him or kissed him, and I would just say that I felt bad or that I had my period. A month later, my boyfriend goes on another work trip. My boyfriend even invited me to come on the work trip, but I said no. Instead, as soon as he left, I called his dad and told him to come over. I told him I just wanted to talk, but really, His dad came over, we talked for about an hour, and then it happened again. It's like we just couldn't help ourselves. That's when he told me that he was catching feelings for me and that maybe even wanted to get a divorce. Part 3 is Part 3 of how I hooked up with my boyfriend's dad. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My boyfriend's dad tells me that he wants to get a divorce from his wife because he's catching feelings for me. He even suggested that we could move away to another town. And yes, at this point, I had totally fallen for him too. But at the same time, I still had a relationship with his son. But to be honest with you guys, I didn't have the guts to tell my boyfriend that I loved his dad. Since my boyfriend was still on the work trip, his dad would come over almost every single day. His wife, aka my mother-in-law, didn't even notice that she was coming over to my place. She thought he was at work and at the gym. We are now fully in love. My boyfriend came back from his work trip and of course, I was still distant. A few days later, he asked me what was wrong and I just don't know what to tell him. His dad told me to keep quiet for now because he wants to figure out what to do. I don't want to end a marriage and I know I don't want to break my boyfriend's heart. But at the same time, I am in love with his dad. I know you guys are going to think I'm a terrible person, but I genuinely need your advice. What do you guys think I should do? Should I be honest with my boyfriend? Part 4 about how I got caught hooking up with my stepson. After my stepson and I got caught in his bedroom by his mother, aka my husband's ex-wife, they forbade us from talking to each other or even seeing each other. My stepson moved out of our house, and I literally haven't spoken to him in about a week and a half. Here's the thing, my husband didn't really react the way I thought he would. He was definitely angry about me hooking up with his son, but he wasn't really angry about me having an affair. But the night that he found out, he told me he was also having an affair, and that it was one of his employees. Basically the same way his relationship and mine started. If you haven't seen part 1, you should go see it. In part 1, I tell you that he cheated on his wife with me. In other words, my husband definitely has an MO. A few days later, my husband grabs my purse from me and cuts up all my credit cards. He even took my name off of our shared bank account. So even though I live in this beautiful mansion with lots of fancy cars, I don't have any money of my own. Then he told me that it was his ex-wife's idea to take all the money away from me. I guess she must think I'm a gold digger. I convinced my husband to give me an allowance. I still have to do my nails. But things get complicated again. My stepson DM me on Instagram, part 5 is up. Part 6 of how I got caught hooking up with my stepson again. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram, not my story time. So hubby comes in and finds his stepson and I sitting on the couch. That's when my stepson, I have to stop calling him my stepson, more like my boyfriend now. He confronts his dad and tells him that we are in love. He even told him that we want to get married and move in together. That's when hubby accuses me of brainwashing his son into having an affair with me. Then he accused me of brainwashing him too into having an affair with him. That's when the doorbell rings. Yep, it's my husband's ex-wife and my stepson's mom. She starts calling me a homewrecker, saying that I took her husband away and now I'm taking her son away. Trust me, I understand where this woman is coming from. My stepson explained everything to her, and the fight went on for about 3 hours. Oh yeah, remember I told you guys I took a pregnancy test that was false? Well, I started feeling sick the other day, so I went and got another pregnancy test, and that one came out positive. My stepson and I went to the doctor, and it's confirmed I am pregnant. My husband finally agreed to give me the divorce, and he also gave my stepson his trust fund. So now we have a lot of money, and we're looking for our own house together. I guess everything has turned out pretty good, but I've been banned from every family event in the future. Should I do a part 7, you guys? Thank you for listening to my story. Story time about how I cheated on my husband, lied about getting pregnant, and left with all his money. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Oh, this is gonna be a good one, you guys. A little background, my husband and I met 2 years ago. And lucky for me, he's a wealthy plastic surgeon. So a little backstory. I actually met him because I wanted to get a nose job. I made an appointment in his office and I went. We actually hit it off right away, even though he's older than me and, wasn't the best looking. After the appointment, I decided I would get the nose job. A few days later, I get a phone call. Guess who it is? It's the wealthy plastic surgeon who I just saw. He asked me out on a date and I said yes, of course. By the way, at the time I was a sugar baby, so I had a few sugar daddies. I figured he would just become another sugar daddy. He took me out to the best restaurant in town, and you better believe I ordered the most expensive thing on the menu. After my surgery, he would bring me food and was just really nice. Then he asked me to be his girlfriend and I decided to give him a chance. I even broke up with 2 sugar daddies to make space for him. That's when I asked my boyfriend for an allowance. He said of course. There's so much more to this story. Part 2 is up. Part 2 about how I cheated on my husband, lied about being pregnant, oh yeah, and stole all of his money. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. This was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said in part 1, I had asked him for an allowance. Of course he said yes and offered me $3,000 a month. I accepted even though it was on the low end. By the way, I still had 1 sugar daddy at this time. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I was pretty obsessed with the Kardashians. My goal in life is to look like Kim K. So now that I had a plastic surgeon boyfriend, I decided to ask him what other surgeries he thinks I could do. I already had my nose job. Now I definitely wanted to do some other stuff on my body. But when I told him, he got really upset. He said I didn't need to change anything about me and that I needed to stop looking for attention from other men. That's when I told him that would be totally impossible and that I definitely was going to keep my other sugar daddy. He totally flips out because he didn't know I had a sugar daddy. Then he asked me if I was actually in love with him. I told him that love would grow eventually, but that I really did like him. Then he started playing hard to get, like he wanted me to apologize and beg him, but I was not the type. So we ended up not speaking for a few weeks. Eventually he comes over to my apartment and asks me what surgeries I want to get done. And back to the surgery table I went. Part 3 is up. Part 3 about how I cheated on my husband, lied about being pregnant, oh yeah, and stole all of his money. Well, almost all of it. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So my plastic surgeon boyfriend decides to do more plastic surgery on me. But this time, it was free. We decided to get my bum done. Again, during the healing process, he was a total angel and brought me food and took care of me. Yeah, he was also paying for all of my bills and my rent at this time, even though I still had a sugar daddy. And he knew it. A few months passed and he asked me to go to Italy with him. Of course I said yes. We stayed at a beautiful place in Tuscany and then he asked me to marry him. He had planned out this whole romantic dinner and of course I had to say yes. But on one condition, that I let go of my last sugar daddy. So I told him I would, although I actually did not. So we started planning my dream wedding. We finally got married and I moved into his mansion. Then he told me that I had to get pregnant right away. His excuse is that he's in his 50s and he really wants to have kids. I said I wanted to have a baby too, but I kept taking the pill. I mean, I am just not ready to have kids or to ruin my beautiful body. This is when my other sugar daddy started getting really annoyed because I never spent time with him. It was really hard being torn between 2 men. Part 4 is up. Part 4 about how I cheated on my husband, lied about being pregnant, and stole all of his money. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said, my sugar daddy was starting to get really annoyed at me because I never spent enough time with him. That's when I broke it to him that I was actually married. He totally flipped out, called me a user, cut me off, and blocked me from everything. So that meant I was not getting money from this sugar daddy at all. It meant I was totally dependent on my husband. Remember I said my husband wanted me to get pregnant? Well, I kept taking the pill because I didn't want to get pregnant. But my husband would ask me every single day how that was going. And I was like, it's going. I even started lying, saying that I was going to go to the baby doctor just to get myself checked, and I really wouldn't. Instead, I would go have lunch and shop. Around this time, an old sugar daddy of mine contacted me, who I still had a crush on. He was like super good looking. He offered me some money and asked me if I wanted to go on a few dates, so of course I said yes. I accepted because I really wanted to just separate myself financially from my husband. I didn't want to be dependent on him all the time. So when my husband was at work, I would go out on dates with this new sugar daddy. The sugar daddy wanted me to go on a trip with him, and I had to say no. He got really upset and started asking questions. Of course, I didn't tell him that I was married, but he started getting really suspicious. He also started to catch feelings really quick. Like he always wanted to be with me. He would text me all the time, and that's when my husband finds a text message from the sugar daddy. I basically denied everything and I told him that I no longer had any sugar daddies, but my husband did not believe me. That's when he calls my sugar daddy from my phone and tells him to leave me alone. And the sugar daddy told him that only I could make that decision. So I basically had to cut off the sugar daddy right in front of my husband. My husband was like really angry at this time, so I was on my best behavior for the next few weeks. But after a few weeks, he was still really angry, so I realized I needed to start taking money out of the account that he gave me. So I started transferring money from his account to my account. And then from my account to another account at a different bank. And guess what? My husband did not notice one bit. He had several other accounts and investments and all this other stuff, so he never really noticed if anything went missing from that one account. After a few months, I had $50,000 in that bank account. I knew it wasn't enough, so I had to start taking more money out. And then a few months after that, I was at $120,000. I knew this was enough to get me a little house somewhere and just like basically live by myself. That's when I devised a whole plan. Would leave the country and buy myself a house. Even started looking for a real estate agent in other countries. But then the poo hit the fan. My husband found my pills and asked me if I was actually trying to get pregnant or not. Once again, I started lying and I told him that of course I wanted to have a baby with him. Then he insisted we go to the doctor together. That's when he found out that I had not gone to the doctor once. He told me that if I didn't want kids, we would have to get a divorce, so I told him that I didn't want kids. That's when I told him I wanted a divorce and that I only wanted half of his stuff. He started laughing in my face and left. I knew I had to act quick because it was a matter of time before he found out I stole all that money. The very next day, I booked a flight and left. He started blowing up my phone, asking me where I was, calling me. Then he started threatening me for taking all the money in the bank account and that he hired private investigators to find me. Now I'm considering going back to him, but I honestly don't know what to do. I got myself a cute little house and even found a new sugar daddy. But I know he's still looking for me. What should I do, you guys? I think I really messed up, you guys. Story time about how I'm hopelessly in love with my boss and I'm about to be a homewrecker, but help me! Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So I've been working for my boss for 3 months. He's in the tech world and he makes lots of money, and he hired me as a personal assistant. He's got a wife and 3 kids. They've been married for 15 years, and he's 18 years older than I am. One day my friend told me that this guy was looking for a personal assistant, and I applied for the job. I had my first interview, and right away, I was super attracted to him, and I could tell that he was attracted to me. Like, you know, when you like someone, and, you know, there's just a vibe between you guys. He then called me in for a second interview, and in this interview, we basically spoke about everything he would want me to do and what the job entailed. I mostly had to run his schedule and set up meetings for him with clients and different things like that. So it's not like I was getting him his laundry or running errands for him. A few days later, he calls me and tells me that I got the job. He offered me a lot of money, more than it was advertised at the beginning when I went for the interview. So I took the job. But here's the thing. From the time I did my first interview, I had not stopped thinking about this man. Like, I already had feelings for him before I even started working for him. So I decided to dress really cute for my first day, and he noticed. I mean, I was playing this man like a fiddle. My goal was to get him to fall for me. After the first week, he asked me to go to lunch with him to celebrate the fact that I had been doing a good job. Of course, I said yes. Went to this beautiful restaurant and had wine. We then went back to his office and I went home. Later on, he sends me a text message saying that he's so proud of me for doing such a good job. Fast forward a few weeks, I kept flirting, he kept flirting back. Finally, at the end of the month, we went to another lunch. This is when he opened up to me and told me that he was attracted to me. I told him I was attracted to him too. Part 2 is up.